your resources of material. Also, I'm going to talk a bit about writing travel memoirs. Memoirs are a very popular genre. A lot of people are writing their actual memoirs as books or as just as little articles. I have a section in Travel Through History that is strictly for travel memoirs. Because a travel memoir can be about a trip. Well, I mean, a trip you took last summer is a memoir, right? It's just a memory now. But it can be a trip that you took a few years back that had some significance to it, and you can write about that. Sometimes if you have to put what they call an if you go thing at the end of a story, then you might have to check online to update some information. But basically the story itself is just a memory about a trip that you've taken. So travel memoirs are also a very useful form of writing about your trips. So the first thing I'm going to look at here is some of the tips about travel writing. And of course, you want to have a unique slant. If you go on a trip and you're away for 3, 4, 5 weeks, you're going to have an awful lot of material, and you don't want to put everything about it all into one story. So you can pick individual bits, like I said, like I did with the Egyptian stories. I wrote one story about the Temple of Philae, and then which was up near the Aswan. And I was quite intrigued with the Nubian boatmen, so I wrote one story about the Nubian boatmen, and I did it like that. So you pick out something that you can focus on to write your story about. So, and something that's quite unique too about it. So one of the things you can do also is, if you're going to go somewhere on a trip, to collect brochures and look at other stories people have written about it and get ideas so that you know what's going to be there that you might want to see. Otherwise you might miss something really important when you go on your trip. So, and one thing you always have to remember is that the travel writing is going to convey a sense of place. So I'm going to get into more detail about that afterwards, about writing with all your 5 senses. Describing the scene so you draw your reader right into it. Describing people you meet along the way, because you're not the only one on the road. There's other people that you're interacting with all the time too, and they make an interesting part to your story. As with any kind of a story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you have a beginning, middle, and end, and you sort of have what you call in the travel writing, you have a lead, and you have the body, and you have the conclusion, and I'm going to show you, demonstrate some more about that afterwards. So, first of all, the importance of keeping a travel journal. Whether you are, when you're traveling, whether you have a notebook with you and you're keeping it on a blog on your notebook, or whether you're writing things out by hand, this is really important because you will forget things. And like, I'll never forget one time I wanted to write about my very first Christmas that I spent in Greece. It was the first time I had ever in my whole life ever been away from my family at that time for Christmas. And I sat down and I wanted to write about, I wanted to remember all the stuff about the gypsies selling the holly in the markets, and there were a lot of things, like, because it was quite different than Christmas here. And I looked in my journal and all I could find was stuff about the latest episode with the Greek boyfriend. And I hadn't written anything about all the details of the Christmas stuff. And I was so angry with myself. And that taught me a lesson, like, pay attention to the things that you see. And so sometimes I'll take now, if I see a sign that has an explanation of what something is, sometimes what I'll just do is take a photograph of it so that I can go back and refer to that. But try to record details in your journal when you're traveling, because those are going to be very important when it comes time to writing up the actual stories. And what I always do is I carry a handwritten journal with me everywhere I go, and because I'm usually a solo traveler, then when I go someplace to a nice little seaside taverna for dinner or something, I take my journal and I write in it while I'm there, and I observe the people around me and write about what happened during the day and that kind of thing. So my journal is kind of a travel companion as well as a document of the things that I've experienced. So now putting your actual words down on paper when you start actual writing. So again, you want to convey the essence of the place. And what your goal is as a travel writer is to recreate that place on the page so that when your reader is reading about it, they can actually visualize being there. So write clearly, keep your sentences relatively short. Use adjectives sparingly, because I'm going to talk about this a little later. Showing, not telling. When you show what's going on instead of just a narrative explaining everything that's going on, show the action of the people and that kind of thing. And what I do with mine, I write everything out in the barest prose first. Quite often I write stuff out by hand before I put it on the computer. And then as I'm working on that bare outline of what the story is going to be, I start adding little bits to it. And I fortunately have a very big critiquing group that I go to. I don't always critique my travel writing pieces with them because there's only one other person in the group that's actually a travel writer, but sometimes I will. And they will say, well, we want to know more about this, or what happened when you went there, and that kind of thing, so you're able to fill in all the spaces. The nice thing about writing travel stories is it doesn't take you 15 years like it took me to write my novel. So you can do a travel story in not very many hours of sitting at the computer and working away on it, and it's quite gratifying in that way. So as long as you make sure, like step by step, you'll get the information you can. If you've forgotten details about things, there's lots of information you can just get by Googling things these days. And this is one of the valuable things, though, about collecting brochures as you go along, because it will have details in there that you might need to add to your story. So, any questions up to